As fears of Russian invasion loom over Ukraine, the United States has dramatically raised the alarm, warning that a Russian invasion could begin within days. The White House said that a Russian invasion starting with civilians being caught under aerial bombing could begin any time, even before the end of the Beijing Olympics, which is by February 20th. The United States has urged its citizens to leave Ukraine within 48 hours.
Signs of Russian escalation, including new forces arriving at the Ukrainian border. As we've said before, we are in the window when an invasion could begin at any time, should Vladimir Putin decide to order it. I will not comment on the details of our intelligence information, but I do want to be clear. It could begin during the Olympics, despite a lot of speculation that it would only happen after the Olympics. If a Russian attack on Ukraine proceeds, it is likely to begin with aerial bombing and missile attacks that could obviously kill civilians without regard to their nationality. A subsequent ground invasion would involve the onslaught of a massive force. With virtually no notice, communications to arrange a departure could be severed and commercial transit halted. No one would be able to count on air or rail or road departures once military action.
Joe Biden will speak to Vladimir Putin today. French President Macron, who has been mediating between the two sides, is also likely to speak to the Russian president today. Meanwhile, Russia and Belarus continue to hold joint military drills less than 100 kilometers from Kiev. Images by the Russian Defense Ministry show tank drills and paratrooper landings during the joint drills. While Russia is sending in more troops near the Ukrainian border, United States and NATO are trying to match its deployment. The United States said that it is sending 3,000 more troops to Poland to reassure NATO allies amid fears of a Russian invasion. The growing alarm over the conflict comes despite efforts at shuttle diplomacy by the US and the West. Earlier, French President Emmanuel Macron visited both Kiev and Moscow. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is expected to do the same in the coming week. But even while leaders hope that diplomacy will work out, the fear of an invasion is only growing. Well, for more updates on this, we are being joined by our executive editor, Palki Sharma, from Ground Zero, and also former Indian ambassador to Kazakhstan, Ashok Sajanhar from New Delhi. Thank you both for your time and welcome to this broadcast. Palki, I will start with you. The U.S. continues to raise the alarm over Ukraine and advising citizens to leave. Both Biden and Putin are meant to hold a phone conversation today. You are on ground. Despite the military drills at the border, what is really the mood in Kiev?
Well, this is a question that I've been asked every day, I have to say, Eric, and the answer remains the same. Kiev is going about its business. People understand the risks. People understand the threat involved. But letting fear win would be letting Russia win. So they are carrying on with their life as they would on any other day. Having said that, it does not inspire confidence when Ukraine's topmost ally, foremost ally, the US, asks its citizens to leave. The warnings have become more ominous by the day. We've seen what the American president has said repeatedly, saying that he will not send troops to evacuate citizens and the time to leave is now. They're evacuating the US embassy. The Australians and the government of New Zealand has issued similar advisories and orders to its people to leave Ukraine as soon as possible. The Russians are calling it war hysteria. They say that the Americans are mounting a panic campaign. But even here in Ukraine, the people say that this does not inspire confidence and there is no need for such an evacuation. And remember, the US has been calling the threat of war imminent for weeks now. And the memories of Afghanistan are still fresh in the minds of people here, where the American intelligence assessment said that Kabul would fall in 6 months. It fell within days. So when we speak to people, they draw parallels and they say, look at what happened in Afghanistan. We don't trust these doomsday predictions and that war is not going to happen. When you hear them say, there is a mix of hope, there is a mix of tension. I don't think those are realistic assessments of people. I think they hope that there is no war, and that is what they say when they speak to the press especially.
Palki, demands from all ends have been flying around of late. Russia maintains that NATO should not enlist Ukraine. If it does, then that will be a recipe for war. What role does NATO and European bloc play in this Russia-Ukraine situation?
Well, they are trying to talk. There is no denying that. We've seen the kind of shuttle diplomacy that we saw all of this week. Olaf Scholz going to Washington, D.C., Emmanuel Macron coming here in Kiev before after he went to Moscow, in fact, and then he went to Berlin. We've seen talks. The Russians say that they are going to raise NATO deployments at the United Nations Security Council on the 17th of February. So the Europeans are talking. The Europeans are also, some countries at least, like Denmark, changing their policy to allow American troops to be stationed in their country. The Slovak government, despite all the protests and the scenes in parliament that we saw, has allowed American troops to be stationed in 2 Air Force bases for the next 10 years. Free of charge. So European countries are gearing up because they feel that if today it's Ukraine, tomorrow it could be one of them, especially countries in Eastern Europe. So this pressure building tactic of Moscow could backfire. If it wants NATO to be away from its borders, it may be pushing the countries on its periphery to do the very opposite and go closer to NATO as these countries seek security guarantees. If they do not want to live under the shadow of Russia, they will need a powerful guarantor like the NATO, like the European Union, or like the Americans. The European bloc is divided in the sense that some governments are not very keen to be on board and they do not fight what they call America's war, like we heard from a French minister say that we don't want to be pushed into fighting with the Russians over Nord Stream 2 just because America wants to do that. So the consensus on one point is clear, that they do not want a war. How do they want to go about ensuring that there is no war is still something that the Europeans are trying to figure out.
Finally, Palki, as you wrap up coverage on Ukraine, what are some of the take-home or memories you have and will cherish about the country on the edge?
It's a very beautiful country. It's very cold. It snowed overnight and you see this place covered in white. By the time we woke up in the morning, it was all white and we saw all the headlines buzzing with American predictions. When we came here, Eric, it was tense. As we leave today, it's still tense. We went to the border yesterday to a checkpoint that straddles 3 borders, in fact. On one side was Ukraine, on the other side was Belarus and then Russia. And we saw the grit and determination of the border forces, and they said that they know they don't stand a chance in front of a Russian invasion if it were to come to that. But they're doing what they can do, and they're going to stand and defend their country as much as they can. Earlier in the week, we also went to cover a training exercise. Some drills were being conducted, and I think that was the most telling image of what Ukraine is today, because on one side of the road, we saw a kindergarten where children were playing, blissfully unaware of the kind of threat that the country faces. On the other side of the road, barely a few meters away, we saw people training in full fatigues, learning how to go into an ambush, learning how to mount a defense in case of aggression. And that is what sums up Ukraine for me, I think. While they are gearing up for war, they're also hoping to avert one.
Live from Kyiv in Ukraine, Palki Sharma, thank you very much for your insights and for talking to us. Former Indian ambassador to Kazakhstan, Ashok Sajanhar, live from New Delhi, thank you very much for staying on. Ambassador, as tensions between Russia and the West flare up over Ukraine, how can New Delhi keep its balancing act between the great powers?
You know, Eric, what Delhi has been espousing and what Delhi has been urging so far is the path of diplomacy. You would recall that when there was this discussion that took place at the UN Security Council late last month, then India had spoken that we need to protect and preserve the legitimate security interests of all countries concerned. And the way to do it is through diplomacy, through dialogue, through talks. This is what was reiterated by India, by the Indian External Affairs Minister, when he was asked this question in Melbourne, where he's present for the Quad ministerial meeting that took place yesterday. So what we have been advancing is that no country wants a war. You know, exactly what Palki also said, no country wants a war. And I think even as far as Russia is concerned, not only as far as the economic sanctions, etc., but the advantage that it holds in its hand, that will be completely lost when it fires the first shot. Right. So we are arguing and we are strongly pitching for talks, discussions, and you see, even notwithstanding all this doomsday talk that has been going on for the last many weeks, discussions are still going on. As you said, Palki said, Olaf Scholz is going to Moscow and to Kiev next week. There is going to be a telephonic conversation between Biden and Putin today. There's going to be also, Macron has visited Moscow, Kiev, Berlin, but he's again going to be talking to Putin. So I think diplomacy and talks is the way forward.
In your view, how is India supposed to draw the balance between choosing a long-standing partner in Russia and its new Western friends?
Well, we have excellent relations, Eric, with the United States. And of late, over the last 2 decades, the United States has become the most consequential partner as far as India is concerned. We have a comprehensive global strategic partnership with the United States and also with Russia. As you mentioned, it's a time-tested partnership. We have what is called a special and privileged strategic partnership with Russia. And we have about 50 to 60% of our defense equipment of Soviet or Russian origin. So we want to maintain good relations with both these countries, and we are doing so through both words and actions. We don't want to side with either of the two countries. And I think both countries, since they are our strategic partners, they recognize the value of their partnership with India. I would just draw your attention, Eric, to the fact that President Putin was in Delhi on 6th of December last year for the annual summit. He was here just for a few hours, but he invested that time, effort, and energy to come to India. That was his second visit outside his country during last 2 years of the pandemic. Similarly, I think as far as Mr. Biden is concerned, our Prime Minister's visit in September, I think that also was an extremely successful bilateral as well as the first Quad summit that took place in Washington, D.C. Eric.
Mr. Ambassador, India's recent abstention in the Security Council meeting on the Ukraine crisis, what message is India sending about it just being a spectator on this matter?
India is not a spectator. India is taking a proactively neutral position, and it is advocating and urging a diplomatic solution to this. Because the other side would have been, if you vote for with Russia, it would have been, also along with China, you would be standing with China. And the other side, it would have been voting against Russia. Let me draw your attention, Eric, when the discussions took place on the Crimean issue in the UN General Assembly in 2014, India abstained at that time also. Even on the Abkhazia and South Ossetia issues of Georgia, India has always abstained. It has not taken any side. And I think both, meaning this is the depth and the strength of the strategic partnership, that both the sides appreciate it. I would also like to draw your attention to the fact that it is not only maintaining a very dynamic balance between our two very vital partners, but also the question of territorial integrity and sovereignty for India is very critical, because we have on our northern borders China breathing down our neck, and from our western borders Pakistan trying to take away territory from us. So the issue of territorial integrity is sacrosanct for us, and that is also what we would like to maintain in our deliberations at the UN Security Council and with our other partners.
As we conclude this conversation, Ambassador, a military confrontation, a long-drawn stalemate can wreak havoc in global oil and gas markets and in turn hurt New Delhi. What's your take on this?
No, absolutely. I think it is not only New Delhi, Eric, that is going to be harmed by a global by conflict in Ukraine, which has the potential to spread to very many other areas. But I think the whole world is going to be affected, and that is why we are advocating a diplomatic solution through dialogue and through talks. That is, we have said that it will, I have said that it will be harmful to Russia, it will be harmful to the United States, it will be harmful to Europe, it will be harmful to Ukraine. It is not going to be beneficial to anyone. So I think it is high time that all countries, I would say, one last comment I would like to make here. I think the only country that is benefiting from this tension in Ukraine is China, because the focus from China has been taken away. It is Russia has emerged as the worst threat, as the biggest threat as far as global security and peace is concerned. While over the last 2 years, we have seen that the focus has been on China. So I think it behooves upon all of us, the Quad, Western countries, that we move out of this as quickly as possible through an honorable agreement decision by all sides, so that we can focus on what is the real threat as far as global peace and security, not only in South China Sea, not only against Taiwan, not only against India, but elsewhere also is concerned.
My final question to you, Mr. Ambassador, what could be the possible present and future consequences for India and the Indo-Pacific region if a war begins?
America got out of Afghanistan in middle of last year, basically because one of the reasons was that it wanted to focus, it wanted to give its total attention to the Indo-Pacific, to the Quad, and to the looming threat from China. And if there is a conflict in Ukraine, that means, again, it will be, the United States will be distracted, and we will not be able to deal with the real threat that faces the world today. So I would say that not only the death and destruction and the damage to global economy, to lives in the region that it will cause, but it will also give that much of greater strength and provide that time and opportunity to China to consolidate its own presence and be even more belligerent and be even more coercive as far as the Indo-Pacific region and beyond is concerned. Eric.
Thank you very much. Live from New Delhi, former Indian ambassador to Kazakhstan, Ashok Sajanhar, for talking to us and for talking to WION and your insights.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.